So this lesson is going to be looking at what is known as the Kölner Fechtbuch. It is a very interesting fighting book that was held in the archives in the city of Köln. And unfortunately, 2 or 3 years ago, the archives in Köln had a bit of a problem. The city of Köln was building an underground subway, and they just sort of didn't look at the architectural plans properly. They dug a tunnel underneath the archives, and the archives collapsed, or part of the archives collapsed, including the section of the archives that held this manuscript and a bunch of other manuscripts as well. It's been about 3 years since, and they haven't managed to recover this manuscript yet, so it is presumed destroyed. Luckily for us, about a year before this happened, a couple of people went to the archives and made a transcription of it. So at least we have the contents of the manuscript, if not the manuscript itself. Then an English person by the name of James Farrell made an English translation of the transcription. It's not a very good translation, because the original German is really difficult, but it's the only English translation available at the moment, and it's much better than what I could do, so I'm using that for the basis of this class. The manuscript dates from the first half of the 16th century, somewhere between 1500 and 1550. Personally, I think it is from the second quarter of the century, roughly 1525 to 1550, because it is very similar to the style of Paulenfield and Paulus Mayer. So I think it's towards the middle of the century, stylistically, but in terms of people who know what they're talking about, trying to date the book itself, the best they can do is the first half of the 16th century. I think it's a fascinating source to study. It has a longsword section, a section in Messer, grappling, polearms, and it might have a grappling section as well. It's a very, very late Messer treatise. We're looking at almost the middle of the 16th century, and it's talking about Messer, not Dreynschlag. That's interesting. Furthermore, like Joachim Mayer, each treatise is part of a comprehensive system. So, to understand part of the longsword style of the longsword system, we have to look at the Messer treatise to understand at least one of the cuts. I've interpreted it completely differently to start with, and then I was just flicking through the Messer section and I realised it just explained something that I was having difficulty with. So, I think it's part of I think it's a comprehensive system with several disciplines, like we see in Joachim Mayer. It has some connections to the earlier Lichtenauer style of fencing. And it has a lot of unique and quite strange material as well. It has a lot of resemblance to the Marxbrüder curriculum. In 1548, there was a poet called Hans Sachs who wrote a poem or a short treatise about the Marxbrüder. And part of this is someone is asking a Marxbrüder master, what is the curriculum? What are the basic things that you need to know in the Marxbrüder? And the master says, there are 4 strikes you need to know: the Oberhau, the Unterhau, Mittelhau, and Flügelhau. These are the 4 basic strikes of the Marxbrüder in the middle of the 16th century. These are also 4 of the most important and component strikes in this system. So, as well as having links to the earlier Lichtenauer style of fencing, it has great similarities to the concurrent Marxbrüder style of fencing, and it also has a lot of its own bizarre and quite interesting stuff. Since most people who look at manuscripts and try to interpret it as a fighting style take the point of view that they're interpreting a real martial art used for earnest fighting. I decided, why not just assume that this is for the professional? Take a contrary point of view, run with it, and see if I can find out. Because if I took the point of view or made the assumption that it was another earnest fechting style, then I would make similar assumptions, similar interpretations to other people. If I chose a very contrary base assumption, then I could make different interpretations and see what else I could learn. So, that means that what's going to be taught in this class is we'll be working from not a very good translation. And I have just assumed that what we're doing is not real fighting, just professional fighting for the fun of it, or for competitions, or for sport. So, what I'm going to be teaching is probably not, in all likelihood, probably not what the original author intended. But it has allowed me to reach a lot of very interesting conclusions, a lot of very interesting insights, and I've learned a lot of very interesting and valuable skills that I would not otherwise have been able to learn. So, hopefully, what you'll take away from this workshop at the end of it is some new points of view, new ways of thinking about things, and some new skills and ways of performing your fencing. If a source can give us new ideas and new skills, I think that's worth looking at, even if it's all. At the end of the workshop, if you have any ideas for how you might do things differently, or similarities you might draw to other things, please do talk to me afterwards. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, especially if you've studied something like Paulus Mayer, or Joachim Mayer, or Parenfiend, or one of these contemporary systems. I would love to hear your input after the workshop. Now, one of the other fascinating things about this treatise is it begins with what is effectively a flourish. Some of you might notice I've done some work on the so-called Dreynevent flourish, and that's right at the very start of the Lichtenauer tradition. It has been dated to roughly 1389, and that's debatable. But let's call it the 14th century flourish. We're now halfway into the 16th century, and we have what is effectively another flourish, but with a very different style and a very different intention behind it. So we're going to begin with looking at this flourish because it outlines the basic strikes you need for this system. I'm going to draw attention to some of the interesting mechanics behind it. And then once we're finished with this, we're going to go on, hit each other, look at some of the sequences, and move on with that. So, to start with, all you need is a sword. You can put your masks and gloves and things at the side of the hall, and then please take some space along this wall, facing in this direction. Make sure you have some space around you so you're not hitting anyone. Questions?
I don't understand the fourth hall. Oberhau, Unterhau, Mittelhau, and fourth?
The Flugelhau.
Oh, okay.
We see the Flugelhau in various 16th century texts. It's interesting. It's always different. It always includes the same bit. Best done with the left foot. So normally, the Lichtenauer glosses say, when you cut from the right, follow with the right foot. When you cut from the left, follow with the left foot. This says, to do the best cut from the right, do it with the left foot. So this is different already. First technique is different. So what we're going to do is, rather than stepping forward, we're going to lunge at 45 degrees out to the side. Like this. Maybe not 45, but diagonally out to the side. We are pushing the hands out in front of us, making sure the crossguard is protecting us, and we're trying to smack someone in the head. So try that a few times. From the right shoulder, shoot out to the left, and smash with the sword. It says, and then do the same from the left shoulder. And likewise, the cut from the left shoulder is done best with the right foot. So what we're going to do is cut like that from the right shoulder. Then we're going to step forward, rechamber to the left shoulder, go out diagonally with a cut to the head, arms stretched out. So we're kind of going diagonally here. 1, rechamber, 2. Let's try that. Just in your own time, try that. Cut to the right, shoot out to the left. Rechamber to the left shoulder, shoot out to the right. When you are hitting with the cut, where does the power, where does the force, where does the strength come from? Is it from the arms? Punch. Yes? No? No. Is it from this part of the body here, engaging these muscles? Yes? No. Is it from the core muscles here? What do we think? Yes? No? Whole body, yes. One of the biggest parts of striking with strength and force is to involve the hips. To involve the hips properly, it does not mean doing this kind of wobbly thing like that. You have to have control of your core muscles. You have to have control of your thighs. It's no use powering with the hips if your leg collapses like this and you end up in this kind of position going, ha, I'm cutting strongly. You have to have control of your leg muscles, you have to have control of your core muscles, and you have to twist at the hips, as well as working all of these things with structure. So, normally, we involve the whole body when we're doing early linear style fencing by taking the step here. This gives us control with the core muscles, so we're coming forward. Gives us control with the legs because we're stepping, and it gives us the hip motion from this angle to this angle because we're stepping. So because we're stepping, it's a very good rule. In fact, it's one of the first rules that Ringek says. One of the first good lessons of fencing is when you come from the right, step to the right, etc. Here, we break the rule. We step like that. It means we have to isolate the hips. We have to make sure we're controlling the core muscles and the thighs, isolate the hips and pay attention to them. So we're not just doing that, because this even just looks weak. What we're doing is we're engaging all of this in here. So, there we go. By practicing this, we're practicing the engagement of the hips, core muscles and thighs, so we're supporting the strike of the body. This is why I think this is interesting. It might be wrong, but it's interesting. On the same other side, here, I'm not just going elongate, so that's rubbish. I'm isolating and working with this part of my body here. So I'm gaining the strength, the structure, and the force of the impact by deliberately using these parts of my body. So try this again. Think about your hips, core muscles and thighs, and make your cut really good by using the wrong leg to step. Here, rechamber, here. Try that. On you go. Of the flourish. Again, we're moving side to side. It's almost like a fighting crab. And we're moving the sword in interesting angles, again, breaking all the normal rules. So we've just done cut on the right, rechamber, cut on the left. We now bring this back beside the head, down to beside the lead leg. We step out in this direction again, and we cut up into what is normally a left ox, except we're in the wrong leg. But again, we're driving this with the hips, with the core muscles, with the thighs. So you can see from the rectangle, here we are, cut on the right, rechamber on the left, cut on the left, bring it round beside that leg, step out and cut up. So we're going this way, this way, this way. Try and add that in. So, cut on the right, rechamber, cut on the left, bring it round, cut up. Again. Cut on the right, chamber, cut up. This position here, which we normally call the ox, in this source is called the shield. The shield. Whenever it talks about the shield, it means this kind of position. So here we are, done that cut. We bring the sword back down along the same line, beside the back leg. We step out in this direction again, going side to side. And as we do that, we flip it over the thumb. So my thumb stays in the same place, and I rotate the sword around it, so that the back edge of the sword comes down, and just smacks someone in the ear. You've got cut right, left, cut up, bring it back down, and flip it over. So it's kind of like a Stuart's hop. Kind of, but with the wrong foot forward again. Let's try that. Additive. So, right shoulder, cut to the right. Reach chamber, cut to the left. Bring it down, cut up. Bring it back down, step to the right, and flip it over. Right, independently of our legs, we can start to do more interesting footwork. If you were at Jeff's lesson yesterday, you started to see interesting things that you can do with your legs. But to do that, you must be able to move your upper body independently of the legs. You cannot just tie yourself one cut, one step. If you can do things interestingly, differently, you have options. So the next thing we're going to do, here, up, flip it over. We continue that motion, bring the sword round behind us, over the head, to this horizontal position on the right. So we're looking to make a middle hop across the body. But this is a really shit technique if I just swing like that. That's abysmal. I need to control everything using my core, using my hips, using my body. So once I come from here, rather than stepping forward, that makes it really awkward. That makes it awkward, not interesting. I move this leg back a little, just a little bit, like this. Okay? I move it back and twist. I'm not swinging out and twisting because that is awkward. I'm just turning to face that direction, and as I do so, I smack them across this. So this is powered with a very slight step back and a 180-degree twist. And you just smack them in the ribs as you do so. This is all about the hips and the core muscles. Let's add that one in, nice and slowly. So the right shoulder, cut to the right. Reach chamber, cut to the left. Bring it round, cut up. Bring it down, flip it over. Continue that line, down to the left, round behind the head, to this horizontal position on the right. With your back leg, move it slightly further back, twist your body, and slice across horizontally. That's very nice. We'll do that one again. Over. So it's in this horizontal position on your left side, and the same thing. Move your back leg, slightly further back, twist, and cut back across the body. We're doing the middle haul one way, and then back across the body. We're using our hips to turn both times. Do this twice. Cut to the right, reach chamber, cut to the left. Bring it round, cut up. Bring it down, flip it over. Continue motion, the horizontal position on the right, move the back leg and twist. Flip over the sword, so punch behind you, move the back leg behind, and cut back across. That's it, very nice. One more time. Cut to the right, reach chamber, cut to the left. Bring it round, cut up, bring it down, flip it over. Continue that motion around the head, move the back leg and cut across the body. Flip the sword, move the back leg, cut across the body. Excellent. Now, in that position, we're going to start doing the next. So from here, I bring the sword right beside my head and come through the right vexil position. To do that with my foot, I just run like so, and then I take a step forward, a small step forward, just to realign my body forwards. And with the sword, bring it round the head and bring it low. So the long edge down, short edge is up. And we're here. And then, without a step, we swing out with the back edge, twist, and with the step, cut down. Okay, let's add that in. On the shoulder, cut unusual directions and how to use the hips. So we'll do the whole sequence 3 times, and then move on to hitting each other. Yippee! So, right shoulder. Feel about that. Unstable. It takes some getting used to. Once you know how to move your feet from side to side and how to balance by turning the hips, it is perfectly stable. It just requires practice. Any other thoughts? Any other comments about this sequence?
Just a question.
Yes.
So, they mentioned the 2 steps at the beginning, right? The feet go with the right foot.
Yes.
Right. Did they say any other footwork beyond that?
No.
Okay.
The only footwork it talks about in the sequence is this thing to start with, but it is done best with the wrong foot.
Yeah.
What is the advantage of this version with the left foot for the right overhaul?
Sorry?
What is the advantage for you?
That's a very good question.
Did you try it against the overhaul? Or
It could potentially give you an advantage in claiming the centre line. If Jeff attacks me, if I do a normal step and step forward into it, he might still control the centre line. If I step further in this direction, we might be contesting the centre line. Potentially, if I step like so, I might control the centre line. Potentially. Or it might just be a training exercise to make students focus on the hips, so they do not just rely on taking the step. I personally prefer that explanation. I think it's really valuable because it focuses upon the hips and lets us cut independently of which leg is forward, and still make the cuts meaningful and strong. Okay, let's have a very quick drink of water. If you can get your masks and your gloves, we'll move on with the hitting each other bit. Thank you. Interesting feature of this manuscript. But before we get to that, just so you know, there's only 4 positions. Upper right, upper left, lower right. These are the only 4 positions it talks about. In fact, it says there are 4 positions: upper right, upper left, and lower right. It also talks about vexil, but it doesn't specify that that's one of the 4 positions. So, most of the time we're going to hang out here on one of the shoulders, or hang out here in one of these positions. What's very cool about this manuscript is it gives us the concept of an ideal bind. Most of us think, if Jeff comes to me with an attack, you say this is an ideal bind. We're both on our strong side, we're both reasonably well structured, we could both contest the centre line. We can contest the centre line, and from this position, if necessary, we can wind and make a thrust with whatever, like in the earlier systems. But there's only one instance of a thrust in this treatise, and I think it's a feint. There are no real hand hits. For these 2 reasons, I'm thinking it's quite reasonable to say that this is a Fechtbuch style of fighting, because they said no thrusts, no hand hits. That's one of the reasons I made that assumption. So if we're not allowed to thrust, then winding is maybe not that useful anymore. We do see some elements in Yokamir, for example, if Jeff comes in, and also in Paladin, we saw this yesterday. this sort of thing. You can make a wind in a strike, or in yoke and mare, sometimes rather than thrusting into the face, he'll come to here and turn it into a slice, which is also cool. We can do cuts and slices with winding actions, but if we're not allowed to thrust, winding is really not that useful overall. So we strike round from side to side. And bearing in mind, this is the middle of the 16th century, the style of weapon that's been used for this style of fighting is very much the fader. Long, thin, light, good long grip, good for levering and striking round. Not an awful lot of blade presence, which makes winding a bit more difficult. So, if this is an ideal bind for an earlier winding system, then for this style, with striking round, this is our ideal bind, with the short edge. Earlier, my thumb was on top, long edge forward. Now I go underneath with my thumb and binding with my short edge. Because when that happens, I come in like this, he decides he's going to parry it. I'm in the right place just to swing round and make the next cut. It is faster to cut from this bind to this strike than it is to cut from this earlier 15th century style of bind to this cut. So we have this idea of the ideal bind setting up for the next cut round to the other side. And there are 4 openings and 4 ideal binds. When I'm attacking from my right side towards his left side, the ideal bind is short edge when I'm attacking this quarter, and if I'm attacking the lower quarter, it's also short edge. Okay, so if you just, here we are. Short edge is the best bind on this side. So it prepares you for striking round to the other side. When attacking this quarter, the ideal bind is long edge, because from here, it's very easy to come round with a sverho or whatever. What's fascinating is when I attack the lower opening in that side, it says the best bind is with the flat. Here. So if I bind with the flat, I get a wonderful bounce to come back round. So here we are, we're using the flat deliberately to get a bounce. Another reason why I'm thinking Fechtbuch as opposed to dueling. So, what we're going to do is just a small exercise to get us familiar with this. The attacker is going to take 1 step with every cut. The defender is just going to take a step back and parry with every cut. So, if I'm attacking to Jeff, I'm going to step forward and cut that quadrant, this quadrant, that quadrant. Right, left, as I see it. So I'm going to step forward and cut short edge.
Wrong foot.
Yes, sorry. According to the sequence earlier. For the purpose of this exercise, just take a normal step. Good catch. I'll have words with you later. So, step forward, short edge. Step forward, long edge. Step forward, short edge. Step forward, flat. Okay? However, the defender wants to do the parries, that's not important. I don't care what the defender does, just step back and make parries. The attacker, you're doing short edge, long edge, short edge, flat. And I want you to be able to see your thumb in the flat. It's not one of these kinds of flats, where the thumb is on the wrong side. It's the kind of flat where you can see your thumb and the thumb is supporting it. Okay? So take a partner. Please put masks on just in case this goes wrong. Take a partner and try that. Just do it. I'm going to make it more complicated. There's a technique at the very end of the longsword section, but we're going to do it now. It's called the lev, or the lion. Place yourself in the variant, which is this low, balanced position, and with your head not too high. That's interesting, it's not this. It's the head not too high, so get behind your sword. Cut the 4 points with strength so that you have a lion's bite, and you may make another 2 strides forward. So it's effectively the same exercise, except down low in divided. And we're doing this to gain distance. I'm attacking my opponent with a good flurry of attacks to the 4 openings. This now sounds like open there. And also, like earlier, Dreynschlag and Anonymous attack to the openings. But I'm doing this in a very low stance, and I'm doing this with the ideal binds. So it's going to be the same thing, but do it with a little bit more lion flavour, and with a lower stance. So this time when I'm attacking Jeff, rather than just kind of walking forward like this, that doesn't look like a lion. I'm going to do it like a lion. Here we are. Here we are. So lower the feet, head not too high, get behind your sword, and do it like a lion. On you go, try that. Any other sources, at least not explicitly. This concept of the ideal bind, putting you in the position to strike round to the other side. Short edge on your right side, long edge and flat on your left side. This is interesting. I think one of the really high-level skills that we can learn from practicing this sort of thing is how to manipulate our grip, the crossguard, and the edge alignment, even just in that last second before a bind happens. So maybe Jeff and I are fighting. I decide, right, I'm going to come at him with a long edge Dreynschlag. I'm going to cover this distance and hit him. So in I come. Boom, is my plan. But he goes to parry. I do not want to end up like this because I'm stretched out. It's going to be very difficult to strike round. It's going to be too much effort. I want to make this easy, or even ideal. So, at the very last second, I realise a bind's about to happen, so I make an ideal bind. When I realise I'm not going to hit him, I set myself up with the ideal bind for the next position, for the next attack. I think this is an interesting concept, and it requires lots of very fine detail skill in what you're doing with your fingers and crossguards. It's a useful skill to learn, a useful skill to train. Even if it's all wrong, it's an interesting skill. So, we're now going to look at one of the sequences, the flugel, the wing. We see the flugel, or the flugel, or the flugelhub in various different sources. They're all different. They're all different, but they all contain the same component part, which is this. This winterhall is the long edge from the right, because that has various mechanical benefits, mechanical advantages that are nice. And I think, because it has these advantages, it is promoted to having its own name. Just like the Sornhall has mechanical advantages, so it's worth having its name. The Scheiterhall, however you do it, has mechanical advantages to merit its own name. This has mechanical advantages that I think allow it its own name as the winging cut. So, this winging sequence is interesting. If you can put your mask on a second. We're going to do this in a stepwise fashion. I want you to make sure that you always make your attacks meaningful. If my first attack to Jeff looks vaguely like that, he doesn't need to parry. So the whole thing falls down and my first attack is rubbish. Step 1, land the hit properly. Defender, take it. But if the attacker does not land a good hit, you can make fun of them. So, step 1, I make a short edge cut here to Jeff's head. Okay, step 1. I land the hit. Step 2, he parries. He needs to make sure he gives a good enough parry that I don't hit him with my good attack. He doesn't want to overcommit to it. He just wants to make it tight, technical, and correct. That is the defender's job for step 2. Tight, technical, and correct. So, step 2. Here we are. Nice. Step 3. We make a long edge cut round to the elbow. What I would like to do, because we're not wearing elbow protection, is be nice. What I want to see is this. So step 3, here we are. Cut round, stop, turn your flat, flick the elbow. Might as well practice the concept of changing to a flat bind down here. Might as well practice it, since we're not wearing elbow protection. So, step 1. Land the hit. Step 2, he parries. Step 3, come round the long edge, stop, tap him with the flat. Okay? And you're looking to make that as smooth as you can. So slowly, step 3, I come in, he parries, I come round long edge, stop, realign, tap. With the flat. Everyone happy with that? Please take a new partner, preferably from a different club. Make a new friend. The sequences are often 4 or 5 movements long. This is the kind of typical flugel part of this sequence, but it continues so. So what they have just done is now step 1. We're going to add to it. So step 1, with the parry here. Step 1. Step 2, he decides he quite likes his elbow, and he makes a parry. Cool. Step 3, I come out of my ideal bind, and come back round the short edge hit, hands low, and short edge hit to the head. What I'm not doing is this, because my arm is right next to his sword. He could potentially slice me or do something nasty to me. I come hands low. So here, hands high. Here, hands low. So, step 1, what we just did. Step 2, with the parry. Step 3, flying back round with the short edge. Here. So we're doing short, flat, short. Happy enough with that? Play with that. Just done is now step 1. So, there's a final couple of steps to add on to this drill. They're kind of cool. What we've just done is almost like powering fields. Fluid. He comes in, short edge, long edge, short edge. That's what powering fields says. This adds an extra step, which is interesting. So we come in, step 1, what we've just done. So here we are. Here. Step 1. Again, 2 parries. Step 1. Here. Step 2. He parries again. He goes, well, fuck. This is sword in the way. Step 2. Here we are. Step 3. I flow around his parry and cut back on the inside of his sword. So step 3 slowly. Here we are. Takes it away, almost coming through a hanging guard, step in that direction, and cut to the face, or neck, or hands, or forearms, or here, behind his parry. Again, step 3. Here we are. Hang. That lets his parry become a little bit too wide. Come in with the long edge and cut to the lower left position, is what we're told. We're told short, elbow, short, and then cut behind his sword to the lower left position. So one more time. Step 1. We'll do the setup. Step 1. Without the parry. Step 1. Here we are. Making sure that we're keeping the pressure up and making good attacks. Step 2. He parries. Step 3. Flow around and cut in behind with the long edge. I will do this in this speed. And even if you don't quite flow round, you can still slice across the face, the throat, arms, and try this one slowly at first. At least step 3, try it slowly. Try and flow around the parry and cut in behind it. If you're happy enough with that, take the speed up a little bit. Please don't try that. That is their flow. That is the winger. It's interesting, I quite like it. And it makes use of these ideal bind positions. There's another technique called Dreynschlag, the tugging, the twitching, however you want to translate it. And yesterday I showed that Paulus Mayer has an interesting form of tsuken. If I'm here and Jeff parries across, what Paulus Mayer does for tsuken is this. He does tsuken to half sword. Here, the tsuken is again different, or the Dreynschlag is different. It is exactly the same sequence as the flugel, but as the attacker, you do not let the defender bind with you. Just before the parry happens, you tug it away and go to the next attack. And he goes to parry, so you tug it away and go to the next attack. And because you deny him the tactile feedback of making a successful parry, his parries become bigger and bigger, making it easier for that last one to come round and come in behind it. And there are a few sequences in this book where it teaches you one way of doing things, where he parries, so you make the ideal bind position and you bounce off it, immediately followed by the same sequence where you do not let the parry happen. You just tug it round and you deny tactile feedback. That appears to be a stylistic element of this system, or this way of fighting, is sometimes deny the defender the bind and take away his tactile feedback. There's actually a very interesting bit of text that goes with this. So you do the same sequence as before, but you tug it away whenever he goes to bind, and you just hit him at the end. But thus, you are not open, not exposed to fueling. And we all know that fueling happens in the bind. When Jeff attacks me, I bind, I read the pressure, I work out what's happening, and because of fueling, I can act in this and do something nasty to him in the bind. But if we deny tactile feedback, we are not exposed to fueling. So the author knew about fueling. He knew about winding actions, and he knows the risks that winding actions can involve. So he says, do the previous sequence, but don't give him any tactile feedback, and then he cannot use fueling against you. That's quite cool. That shows a knowledge of the earlier systems and the deliberate movement away from them in a different direction. So, Dreynschlag, we're just going to do this in one step. It's going to be like the final step of the flugel, but whenever Jeff goes to parry, I snatched away. So not too fast to start with, so just one step, here we are. Snatched away, and cut. Snatched away. I use it the very last second. Don't be too hasty. I mean, if I come in like this, Jeff goes to party and I change and he goes, that's too early. Leave it until the last second, and then tug it away and deny the tactile feedback. So with even just the first part of this, as I come in here, he goes to parry, and I take it away, and I take it away, and I take it away and hit. There we go. So it's just like a plural, but don't allow any parries to bind with your sword. Does that make sense? Good. With your partner, try that. Okay, so in a very similar fashion, if you can put your mask on a second. We're going to look at a technique called Dreynschlag, or Dreynschlag, the squinter, or the squinting cut as we would normally know it. But we would normally think of the Dreynschlag as something like this or something like that. No. This is quite literally like someone with a squint. I feint a cut to Jeff, he goes to parry, and I tug it away and come round and hit him. I don't let the bind happen. We see this sort of thing with a bind quite a lot. People like coming through this position and striking round. So again, we see this sort of action quite a lot. This I am with the parry. Good parry. Keep yourself safe. We see that sort of thing. People like to run in, one cut, play his parry, come round in seconds. That's cool. But there's tactile feedback. It gives him an opportunity to bounce off the parry and cut to the head, or slice, or do something fun. The moment I come in with that strike, and he makes his parry, I have to leave the parry, and he's still in control of this line for a moment. He could just poke me, smack me, or as I lift my hands, he could come underneath with a slice, in good Kölner fashion. But if I do not give him the tactile feedback, if I do not let him make his parry, he cannot find my blade. So he's still wondering where my blade is as I'm coming round. He might bring his sword back round and parry, but I'm not giving him the opportunity to find my blade and make a thrust or a strike from my blade to me. So, it's exactly the same principle we were just doing, denying the tactile feedback. This is a stylistic element of this system. It's just like someone with a squint. It's like I'm looking over here, but I'm actually looking over here. Like a person with a squint. So, just do this in one step. Try it slowly, but try and deny the tactile feedback by as small a distance as possible. So as we come in, here we are, and just at the last second, take it away. And come in with the strike. Just at the very last second. Make it as small and subtle as you can. It's no use doing this. So you can see that coming from a mile away. Big. Make it small, subtle, and just deny the tactile feedback. One more. Here we are. There we go. This is the squinting cut in this system. Please take a new partner from a different club and try that. Interesting statement at the end of this technique. Feint left and strike right, or feint right and strike left, so that you proceed against your opponent with a joyful expression. So as you do this, smile. Otherwise you're not doing it right. That's very important, smile. Another technique. The two we've just done are about denial of tactile feedback. This technique is about fucking with tactile feedback and just confusing the issue. This technique is called the sheller, or the bell ringer. And while you could perhaps translate sheller in various different ways, the description is very nice. Chime once, twice, 3 times against his blade so that you make his openings. So it's like you're ringing his bell. If you can do that one. So, we see this quite a lot in sparring. We're both hanging out in this position. You see people like this all the time. They think we're playing at fencing now, we're doing this kind of stuff. Oh yeah, this is cool. The bell ringer deals with this situation. We don't really notice the odd bit of tactile feedback here. We don't really notice the touch. So I give him touches. I chime once, twice, 3 times, and that gives me an open. Just gradually increasing the strength on each chime. 1, 2, 3. So again, here we are. I do it quite swiftly. So we're here, we're kind of playing the game. I go 1, 2, 3. And I come in with what is effectively a chrome paw across the forearms. So this time I'm not denying tactile feedback. I'm fucking with him by giving him too much tactile feedback. So here we are. We're playing the game. So we're moving a little bit here. We're thinking, okay, what's going to happen? So I go tap, tap, tap. All with my right leg forward. 1, 2, 3. So I'm just giving it a bit more of a punch each time. And then, once his sword has been batted down, I shoot him with crossed hands, with a long lunge, or, if it works better for you, a step. I don't care. But shoot him to his openings and cut him. Now, you could hit him in the head. I could go 1, 2, 3 here, but then he can smack me. I don't want to be smacked, so I control. A lot of this is about control. So here, 1, 2, 3, the forearms are open, the hands are open. I don't go for the hands, Fechtbuch style. I go for the forearms. And I come here. Once I've controlled him, I can go to the other opening. Boom. Nice. I think that's cool. I like that. I've managed to do this a few times in sparring, and my opponent just doesn't know what's happening until all of a sudden I pin down here and smack him in the face. It's nice. So again, one more time, we're just kind of playing the game. This is happening. Maybe there's a bit of accidental feedback here. But then, when I'm ready, I go 1, 2, 3, and then boom. Slowly, 1, 2, 3, shoot in, however you have to, come across the forearms, hit the head and get out. And this is the bell ringer. You ring his bell and go in. I like this. Please take a new partner and try that.
I ring your bell.
I like this very much. I've had some success using this in sparring. It's not something you can do every time, but if you can do it every so often, it surprises people. So that's something that's entirely new. I don't recall seeing that in any of the earlier Lichtenauer texts. I don't even recall seeing that in Paulus-Mayer, maybe not even in Joachim-Mayer in quite the same fashion. It appears to be its own unique little concept or technique or sequence, and that's cool. But again, it's within the idea of playing with tactile feedback. Sometimes you deny the tactile feedback, and sometimes you overload the tactile feedback. So you're playing with what the person feels in their hand from the sword. So not only are you sometimes keeping yourself safe against his use of fueling by not letting him bind, wind and thrust, but sometimes you fuck with his feeling by giving him too many things to feel. So this is quite a nice method for dealing with someone who does bind and thrust. And we see in the 16th century that there is still binding, winding and thrusting going on. Maybe not in the Dreynschlag environment, but still people teaching that. Still people doing some of that. So perhaps this is for the Dreynschlag, but maybe it's also an anti-winding and thrusting style of system. Or maybe it's not. That's just an idea. But here is something that you'll recognise. It's called Der Alber. We all know Alber as this sort of thing. But instead, if you can get your sword in your mask, I'll read it out and see if any of this sounds familiar. Start in the lower right position, then turn the point and hold the shield. Remember, that's the ox-like position. Turn the point and hold the shield in front of the head, therewith to break what the opponent strikes from the roof. That sounds remarkably similar to the verse in Zettel, which says that Sverha takes away whatever comes from above. And in fact, I start in the lower right position, I turn the point in front of me, I stand in the shield, and therewith take away whatever he strikes from the roof. So if you make a cut towards me, except this is called Der Alber. So this is not from the shoulder, where we dive out to the side. It's not this thing, which is what we're used to seeing as the Sverha. It is coming from here, and we're turning around the point. And this is kind of cool, because the point's in front of us, he attacks, I turn around the point into the shield. That keeps me safe. It's actually really quite safe for the hand to do this from the lower right plough position. He comes in the early Lichtner text, this would be ideal for absetzen or ansetzen. And we go into thrust. But remember, no thrust, this is a Fechtbuch environment, so instead of stabbing him in the face, we smack him in the head. Cool. So he strikes from above. Here we are. So, step one. We're going to do this as a drill in 3 parts. Step one. He comes in with the strike. He makes a good strike, because otherwise, what's the point in practicing this? So step one, he gives me a good strike. Cool. Step two, I pivot around my point and simply turn the shield in front of me. I'm twisting my hips. I am not yet stepping. Step one. Step two. Step three, finish the thing. So this is very reminiscent of the earlier texts in the Lichtner tradition. It's like the Dreynevent, but first of all, the attack comes in, we find the blade, we bind, we close the line, we keep ourselves safe, we wind, and make a cut. A winding cut rather than a winding thrust. So sometimes, when it suits you, let a bind happen, let a wind happen. Never let him bind and wind, but you can. So, one more time. Step one, make it a good attack. Step two, turn, again slowly, turn around the point, and hold the sword and the shield in front of you. We're just turning the waist. We're not stepping. Step three. Same thing, but finished with the cut to the head. Please take a new partner and try that.
Sorry.
You're enjoying that too much. Okay, we only have 10 minutes left. We're going to do one final sequence. And it's kind of cool. This sequence is called the Easer Port, or the Iron Gate, which is usually defined to be somewhere between here and here. This is usually Iron Gate-ish. But here, we quite literally draw a gate and slam it in the face. I like it. You can put your mask on. So, if you can start off in the lower position on that side. Just here. That's it. So, we both start off here, but rather than being on this side of each other, let's just assume for the moment that we're approaching and we're not quite in opposition. The swords are short edge to short edge. I don't want to linger here, I need to do something. And so what I do is it says make der Flügel. So from here, all I'm going to do is just cut to his arm, like that. Rising with the long edge or with the flat, whatever. He parries. So step one is I just make the cut to the arm. We're both hanging out here, and step one, without the parry. Step one, I cut to the elbow. Cool. Step two, he parries. So I make sure I bind to the flat, and then I bounce off and strike round from the right into the schild. Remember, this thing's called the schild. This position's called the schild. So, step one, make the Flügel to the arm. Here we are. To the elbow. Funny bone. Haha. Step two, he makes a parry. Step three, I strike round from the right into the schild. Here we are. So I'm not striking down, like earlier. I'm striking from here to here, just like in der Alba. Effectively, it's Farrell. So we're doing a left Unterhaw, and a right Zwerl. This is the first part of the Iron Gate. We're describing this wall, we're describing the roof. Do the next bit in a moment. Take a new partner, practice those 3 steps. Make sure step 1 is a good attack.
One more.
So, what we've just done is now step 1. So step 1 looks like this. That's it. With the parry. Yep. That is step 1. Step 2, he parries. Step 3, we come out of this into der Gassenhue, or the trench cut, down to our right. So from this position, I step forward again and cut like that through the head down here. But that's what I thought it was previously. And then I looked at the Messer section. And in the Messer section there is a technique called der Gassenhue, which is you cut from above, down to the side, and then with the back edge straight back up the same line. It can be in either side, sorry, with Messer. Here we are. Or on the other side, here, here. That is a trench cut. It's almost like you're digging a trench. You put the spade into the ground and you dig the trench and throw the earth somewhere over there. So if that's the trench cut, if I've got to hit him in the head and then do this, that seems a little bit strange. So rather than letting himself be hit, he is just going to step back. Okay? So once I come round from here, he's parried, I step forward and cut like this, and he scuttles back. making sure I can't hit him. I come down to the ground. Now, from here, there's a horrible chance he'll come in at me again. That's problematic. So this is why we have the trench cut. Once I realise I've missed him, I bring it right back up. Either I clear this all out of the way, or I smack him, or I just make him not want to step in. So, step one is what we did before. Step two is the parry. Step three, I come from this position and cut like that. He scuttles back, I come down, and I bring the back edge up. This is really cool, because it's like we're describing the wall, the roof, the other wall. It's an iron gate, so we slam it in his face. I love that. Originally I thought it was just describing an iron gate. Side, top, other side. But then, from looking at the method section, you slam the gate. And that's one of the reasons why I think the disciplines can be used together to form a comprehensive system across all of the sections. Because Dergas and Hugh in the Messer treatise let me understand this sequence from the longsword. I don't know if there's any more examples when that's the case. If you find any, please let me know. So, one more time. Step one, what we did before, cut, cut. Step two, with the parry. Step three, with the trench cut. And he scuttles back so I don't hit him. There we are. And that last bit, coming up here, he just doesn't want to step in against me. So, with your partner, please do that.
Okay.
We're finished now. So, draw things together and to conclude. This is a 16th century text. It's anonymous, we don't know who wrote it. It's from the first half of the 16th century. So it's, I think, stylistically, it's from the second quarter. So it's very much like Paurenfiend. It's kind of like Paulus Mayer. It's kind of like Wilhelm in various ways. I think it's interesting. It's a very different style of fighting. It focuses on, well, at least my interpretation, focuses on some very interesting skills that we don't normally think about. We often think about that rule about stepping with the correct leg, but we don't think about isolating the hips. So doing this, for example, and always kind of bouncing from side to side, like that, with the wrong leg forward, teaches some very interesting skills and some very useful mechanics on how to make strikes successfully in balance in an awkward situation, or what would be an awkward situation if you had not practiced it. The sequences, some of them are similar, or can be interpreted in a similar way to the earlier, more canonical Lichtner stuff. Some of them are unique. The bell ringer, 1, 2, 3 in, is lovely, and it's completely unique. It has some of the same names for things as the Lichtner tradition. For example, Alber, the Eisenport. It has the ox. The ox is quite a funky sequence that comes through this position. This is the only thrust in the book. It says, start in the lower right position, bring the pummel to your chest, and the point to his face, and thrust at his face. And when he parries, make the flugel, and from that, make the squinter. So it's quite an involved sequence. You've got to come from here, be parried, come like that, come round, and back round. So you're kind of bouncing from side to side quite a lot. You've got to have good balance and good use of hips to support that, because you've got no time to take full steps as usual. But that here is the only thrust in the system, as far as I'm aware. Another reason why I think it's Fechtbuch. We never see them saying, hit the hands. They don't say, don't hit the hands, but they never say, go for the hands. So I decided to interpret this as Fechtbuch style fighting, rather than trying to make it earnest fighting, because I thought it would be interesting and a bit different. I thought it would let us learn some interesting skills that we wouldn't normally think about. For example, tactile feedback. Sometimes the denial of the tactile feedback, and sometimes the overloading of the tactile feedback. I think that's an interesting skill. The concept of the ideal bind, to have the fine control in this hand, to start a motion at the last second, to make the ideal bind, that's a valuable skill. If you can turn your edge to make the ideal bind, you can also turn your cross-guard and edge into a parry so you do not get smacked in the fingers. It's a useful skill. Furthermore, if you also have the skill to almost be parried and yank it away and come round, you've got a lot of fine detail, skill in controlling the sword, and that's valuable. Do you feel that you learned something interesting from this class?
Yes.
Good. What was the hardest bit of it? I'm intrigued. What was most difficult?
Different steps. Just at the beginning.
Right at the beginning, different steps. Something to practice in, that's your homework. Anything else? Did anyone find anything else to be the most difficult?
Yeah, the ringing. I really feel it difficult because you go in the way. I just got away there.
Well, in that case, you need to practice going soft, middle, hard, and to vary the intensity of your strikes, and that's a useful physical skill as well. So, thank you very much for coming to this lesson. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and I hope you've taken something from it. It looked like you were performing very well, and I saw some really nice things coming out of it, so thank you for coming along.